Thanks so much for joining us online today. We're glad you're here. Today at Timber Ridge, we had a conversation that matters, addressing an important topic in our culture, race and the church.
That's right. For far too long, the church has been silent when it comes to issues of race. Yet Jesus calls the church to be a unifier. As followers of Jesus, we're called to love one another, to be bridge builders in our communities that model how people of different backgrounds, ethnicities, and groups can come together to love one another well.
So today, we're privileged to have this conversation with two of my very good friends. Pastor Damien Williams, who's one of our very own Timber Ridge church planners and such a good friend of our church, and Braxton Mitchell, who's a part of our Timber Ridge family right here in Stephenville, Texas. I invite you to lean into this conversation with us today, and let's learn how to love each other better. Welcome to Timber Ridge Church. My name is Nick. My wife Johanna and I are co-pastors here at Timber Ridge, and on behalf of our church family, we want to welcome you here today. We're honored that you would take time out of your weekend to come and to hang out with us. We are in a series called Pin the Grenade, and it's all about how we react and how we treat these hot topic issues in our culture. We've talked about things like social media and loving people we disagree with, and today we're going to talk about racism and race and the issue, race issues and the church, and how we as followers of Jesus can live out our faith in a way that makes a difference. So let me just let you know that you will be uncomfortable today. All right, you're going to be uncomfortable today. You're probably going to hear something that makes you uncomfortable, and that is 100% okay. It's okay to be uncomfortable, because when we're uncomfortable, that's when we grow. We don't grow when we're comfortable. We grow when we're uncomfortable. And so it's okay to be uncomfortable today. We put a lot of thought and a lot of effort into today. We've done a lot of planning. We've been talking about doing this since June, I believe. We even put thought into how we are sitting on stage this morning. I was going to sit on one side and interview these guys and have them sit on this side, and they told me, no, that's racist. The white guy can't sit on one side and the black guy's on the other. So we're up here looking like a giant Oreo this morning. Like a mega stuffed Oreo is what we're looking like this morning. So we've even put thought into how we're sitting. But let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to introduce these guys to you. Some of you may know Braxton Mitchell. He's a part of our Timber Ridge church family. Braxton and his wife Audrey are just a vital part of our team here at Timber Ridge and what God is doing. Braxton, you've been going here for 4 years, that's
4
correct?
years, yeah.
All right, so 4 years, a part of our Timber Ridge family. And many of you also know Pastor Damien Williams. Damien is a friend of Timber Ridge. He's preached here multiple times. We actually helped Damien plant a church in Dallas several years ago called the Word DFW, which has since merged with the church he pastors now, New Hope Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas, the oldest African-American church in the city of Dallas. And so, so we're honored to have you with us today, Pastor Damien. We're going to jump right in and have a conversation today about race and the church. And so there are a lot of people who may not realize the impact that race issues and racism have in our current society due to the fact that they haven't personally experienced it. They haven't personally experienced race issues. They haven't personally experienced racism. So for those folks, could you share some of your experiences of how racism has personally impacted you and what your thoughts are on whether it's still an issue today? Pastor Damien, we'll start with you.
Sure, let me say good morning to all of you. Pastor Nick, thank you for the invite. Good to be back here to my second church home. And I think JT got me about one, so I got to come back and preach again.
I think Pastor JT's been one more time.
One more time with me. Yeah, that's my boy, though. But yeah, racism is real. If you have not experienced it, keep living. I'll just give you an example that a couple of years ago, Pastor Nick and I and some fellow church planners, we were at a training up in Keller, Texas, and we got pulled over. Pastor Nick, by the way, has a very heavy foot. And so
47 and a 20 with the school lights flashing. It was not good.
This white cop, walks up, and, I'm paranoid because I've been raised, you get put over by the cops, hey, man, 10 and 2. Anybody take driver's ed, you know what I'm talking about? 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock. So you put your hand on the steering wheel, make your hands visible. Don't make any certain gestures or jerks. When the police pulls you over, you always respond, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, because I was paranoid. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, my bad. Yeah, so anyway, but, you know, and the reason I was paranoid is because, again, I'm thinking to myself, somebody said it's okay to talk to yourself, just don't answer yourself, that we got pulled over. I'm like, this dude can easily think I'm holding these guys hostage, that I'm, you know, I'm in here against my will, they're in there against their will. I mean, they were tripping, they were acting crazy, you know, a bunch of church planners, you know, we on break, getting ready to go eat some good roastos, Mexican food that day, and I'm like, I got real serious, right? I'm like SAT, ACT serious. You know how it is. You can show your ID, go sit down, and start that test. That's how serious it was. And because, again, that could have gone any kind of way, according to the way that I was raised and to some instances that we've had in our country. If you don't think racism is real, just look at whatever your favorite television news might be, what you watch, CNN, Fox, MSNBC. Some of y'all say, you do know we're millennials, Pastor Damien, and this is a college crowd here today. We don't, news, what's that crap? You know, well, anyway, but no, whatever you watch, you'll look at our country and see there's a race issues. If you're in your 30s or your 20s or you're 18, 19, 20, keep living, and get outside of Erath County. You'll find out there's some race issues. Oh, I heard you in the back. You say you don't even have to leave this county to experience it, right? Because it's real, and it is something that we face as a country. And we're here today to have this courageous conversation and not just sit idly by and do nothing about it, right? So that's why we're here today. And I've experienced it, and that was a day that, grateful, it did go in our favor, but he did get a big old ticket, though. He had to pay.
I did get a ticket. I wish you had been driving that day. Braxton, same question for you. Personal experience, share with us a little bit about how you've experienced that, the reality of racism.
It's definitely real. It's real in our country, and I mean, for me personally, living in Stephenville is definitely real in this town. I can just think about, like, my dad. He was raised in the 50s. He experienced the same thing that I experienced in 2020, and I hate that. I hate that it's a thing, but like, let's say, so I'm a calf roper. I rope calves, like, in rodeos and things like that. So my roommate and I, a few years ago, were leaving Jackpot and Glen Rose. It was really late. He was a teacher here, he's a teacher and a coach here, and I was in school at the time. We were leaving. He had a super old. It had to be like a 70-something Dodge, 80-something Dodge maybe. And one of the tail lights was out, so one of the trailer lights was out also. We got pulled over on 67, and had guns drawn on us by the police. They flashed lights into his truck and asked if we were all high. I've never been high. He's never been high. But that was something that came from that. I can think about being young and my mom sending me and my brothers to the convenience store to go get something for some ingredient that she wanted to cook, and being accused of stealing something when I'd never even touched anything on any of the shelves. So it's definitely a real thing. It's still around, even though it's something that we've, as a country, partly have worked to get rid of. It's still here. I can think about all the technological advances and how many changes we've had and political offices and things like that. It's something that's still here, so it's real.
And like locally, you've shared with me about being followed in stores by security. Like share a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I can think about being treated. So my wife's white. I can think about being treated differently by waitresses and waiters if I'm by myself or if I'm with her. Treated differently walking into certain stores, being by myself and being with her. So I've been followed around stores in Stephenville, like small, like trinket type shops. I've been followed around. I've been asked if I'm here to buy anything or if I'm just looking. I've had it all happen. I'm from Houston. I've lived in multiple towns, and it's definitely alive in this town too. So.
All right. Now, you guys both mentioned instances with police, but I know both of you guys, we've had conversations about police, about law enforcement. Neither one of you guys are, every cop is a bad cop. All the police are evil. That's not your mindset. Can you address that a little bit, Damien, from just from your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when we were little, we played bad cop, good cop, right? And it was just that. And so to wake up every day and say, you know what, all cops suck. They're bad. Just throw them all out. It's foolish. I've got friends, I've got family, I've got church members who are police officers who love what they do. And that simply tell you, hey, when we are called to a situation and it escalates, listen, we are not taught to shoot you in your pinky toe. We're not taught to shoot you in your ankle. We're taught, because of our training, to take you down. And so what we have now is not necessarily more and or less. We have everybody hold up. If you got one of these, just hold it up real fast. Everybody, if you got one. Right, everybody, unless you're old school, got a flip phone. Even flip phones now got cameras, right? So it's not that racism or police brutality is up or down. I'm not here to debate that. It's being filmed now. And literally 5 seconds from a video shot or a camera picture, it goes on somebody's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and it goes viral. And you've got one group out there who, and I want to say this, I didn't say this the other two services, when you hear of the group Black Lives Matter, most black folk are not a part of that group. Those are 3 women who start this group and who are pushing something totally different. When you hear the majority of black folks say Black Lives Matter, we're saying our Black Lives Matter also. Not that no one else matters. We're saying, but we matter also. And so when you're seeing all this police stuff going on and all that, look, I've got friends, even one of the founding members of our church that you guys helped us to start. She is a sergeant right now today with the Dallas. I love her to death, you know, and she's our friend, she's our sister. And listen, we cannot go around saying just all of that. You've got bad doctors. There's some doctors I wouldn't want working on me. You got bad lawyers. I wouldn't want a joker defending me if he had $1 million and tried to give it, because he sucks, right? He can't defend me. I mean, you got bad meat. Go to this store. You're gonna go to another. But we'll put cops in one basket and say all cops are bad. That's not the truth. Do you have some bad cops? Absolutely. Do you have some cops that have bad days? Absolutely. I'm a pastor, and I have some bad days.
That's right. Yep, that's right.
You know, we're doing this certain way we're eating right now, and guess what? Man, I want some beef right now.
Yeah.
Right?
For those of you who don't know, we're fasting from beef for 30 days. Yeah. It is not going well.
I've been having some bad days. All right? And then I come here, and guess where I'm going afterwards? I can't tell you, but I'm going to eat me some food, and I'm going to be dreaming about some beef. But I got to get the chicken or the turkey. So there's some bad in everything. That's the only point I'm making. And for every police officer that's watching us and who will watch this via live stream, and even if you're in here and you're just not uniformed today, all black folk don't hate you. We've got family members who understand. And just like anything else, how I fear for my life, what could possibly happen that day, I also think about some of my friends who are cops who, just like I want to go home at the end of the day, see my 5 children, that cop also wants to go home to see his wife and kids as well. And so it would behoove all of us on both sides, the police officers and those of us who are civilians, to work together to have police reform. You've got community policing and all of these things. And the real issue is, since we're in church and since I'm Black Baptist, we got to preach a little bit, right? It's a sin issue.
That's right.
And the Church of Jesus Christ has to lead the forefront and helping this. So cops, we got you. We love you. Yeah.
That's good. Braxton, anything to add to that?
That was good. I think as far as like cops, like if I can think about like perspective. So
Yep.
if you think about any movie that you've seen or what media shows you, why a cop would pull a gun on me coming to a routine traffic stop, it's probably because he was fearful that I was aggressive, because that's what media shows you. That's what the movies that you see, chances are, if anybody robs anybody, it's going to be a black or Hispanic person. The people that fight are black or Hispanic. The people who are extremely aggressive and steal are black and Hispanic. So should he be afraid if that is only if the only perspective he has of black people is what he sees on TV and what he sees on Facebook and Instagram? Then yeah, he should be afraid. I think how you change that is you change your perspective, that you step outside of that bubble, that you sit down with people that don't look like you and talk about it, like this conversation we're having today.
That's good.
So I think that's important. I think perspective is important for sure.
That's good. So there's a passage in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 14 through 20. I want to read part of it to you. It says, "For Christ himself is our peace, who's made the two groups one, and he's destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility." Braxton and I were having a conversation a few weeks ago, and I told him, I said, as a white person, and I'm going to reveal something about those of us in this room who are white. Maybe it's true of all races, but I know it's true of mine because that's what I am. When we read the Bible, we see white people. You know that old movie, The Sixth Sense, where that little kid says, "I see dead people"? That when we read the Bible, we see white people. Let's just admit it, okay? When I read the word Moses, guess what? Moses in my brain is white. When I think of what's happening when I read in the Old Testament Abraham in my head is white. I see a lot of white folks shaking their head. Jesus is white, Paul is white, John is white, Peter's white, Luke is, Matthew, Mark, they're all white.
All white Egyptians.
Yeah, yeah. Braxton was blown away by this realization. But I see white people. So when we read a passage like this, it's easy to go, okay, Jesus died. It says that through the cross, he put to death their hostility. He's talking about Jews and Gentiles. Well, that was two ethnic groups. That was two different ethnicities. And so what it says is the cross, actually through the cross of Jesus, Jesus destroyed hostility between ethnicities. Now we see it as Jews and Gentiles, well, they're all white, and so Jesus just brought people back together that looked the same. But that's not the case. What the Bible is teaching us is that through the cross of Jesus, the hostility of racism has been destroyed. So on that foundation, in your opinion, we'll start with you, Braxton, what can the church and followers of Jesus do to move the needle forward when it comes to race issues in our nation?
I think in the church, and I'll just use, again, my experience living in Stephenville, I hear a lot of, "Oh man, I don't see color." Like, "Oh, this is my country accent too. Oh, I don't see color, brother. We all the same." And it's terrible. And I think that can hinder your perspective in a lot of ways. Not seeing in color, I think, is the easy way out of loving people how God wants us to love. I think you have to see my color, you have to see my uniqueness, you have to see my culture to even be able to acknowledge like the experiences that I'm telling you. Because if you love me because you think that I only go through the same things you go through and I only look like you do, it'd be really hard for you to even understand or even believe in anything I'm saying. Honestly, that's what I think. So, so my wife's white, like I said. We went to Thanksgiving at her house, they ate pumpkin pie. We eat sweet potato pie at my house. I think, and pumpkin pie is actually not that bad, I found out. I think, culture and uniqueness is one of the coolest things that God ever created. It gives us opportunity to experience trials with people. And I think Like, how do you love somebody who you can't hurt with? How do you love somebody you can't empathize with? And you can only do that if you see color, if you see somebody for who they actually are and not this picture you've painted, you know.
That's good. That's really good, man. Pastor Damien, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, and thanks for asking. I think about Egypt, you know, northern part of the continent of Africa. Okay, all right. But in Luke 10, it talks about this. It uses a curse word, if you would, in Luke 10. It uses the word Samaritan, right? So if you go up to verse like 29, someone asked the question, who is my neighbor? Jesus goes into this discourse, what we call the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10, verse 30 and following. And it says, one day a man was leaving Jericho. He was leaving Jerusalem, going down to Jericho. And basically he got jacked, okay? He got jacked by some dudes, some robbers. Got beat up real bad. He's laying for dead in the road. That's Pastor Williams' translation. But if you read it, it's going to be really, really close to what. So he gets beat down. He's laying on the. Then it says, and just by chance, a priest walks by, sees him in this condition, and walks on the other side of the road. Likewise, a Levite walks up, sees this man's condition, and he also walks on the other side of the road. And then there's this one brother who walks up, who's a Samaritan, who is a half-breed, if you would, or what we would consider or call a mutt. This is a person that is not Jew, that is not Gentile, right? They don't fit in either category. Jews won't have anything with them. They can't go to temple worship. And so they're just stuck out there. They're not full Jew. They're not full, Samaritan or full Gentile. But according to Jews, you might as well be a Gentile if you're not full Jew. So they were just these half-breeds. And he sees this man's condition and does something that neither the priest or the Levite does. He not only sees the condition, but he stops in his track and helps this man, bandages him up, uses what he has in his possession, and helps this man who he finds in this messed up situation. How can we move the needle forward as the Church of Jesus Christ? Is not to just see my blackness, but also realize I've been made like you have been made. And that is a Latin term that we call in the Imago Dei, that we've been made in the image and likeness of God. And if you believe I've been made in his image, like you've been made in his image, you won't just look at communities of color and see that gentrification is going on. You will use your voice to speak against the societal issues that we have. That I am still 7 times more or less likely to get a job, even though I have the same education as my white counterpart. You will still find in our communities over 70% of African American children are being born to single parent homes. Why? Because many of our black fathers are locked up in prison. There was a day that we had more black men locked up in jail than we actually had, registered to vote, some statistic like that. You would notice that gentrification in rural and urban communities, and that's just a big $100 word that says that rich folk with money go into the hood, buy the property, jack up the prices so nobody who's poor can live there. If you come to 75215, where I pastor in the hood. Anybody ever been to the State Fair of Texas? I pastor literally 5 minutes from there, maybe even 2 to 3 minutes if you're driving. So I'm pastoring in the hood, and we have over 75% of people in our community who are renters. Think about that. Black folk get subprime loans, which means because of race that we don't get good interest rates like many of our white counterparts. This stuff is legit. It's real. But unless you live in my shoes or in Braxton's shoes or any one of us of color's shoes, you won't even realize or recognize it because you've got privilege. Some of you may say, well, my mom was a crackhead or my dad, it wasn't in my life. I'd take your life on a good day versus what I had to deal with. Now, I wouldn't give anything for how I was reared and raised because it's made me the man who I am. But the hell and trouble that we had to go through growing up, your worst day is doomsday for me. And so the church's job is to be the eyes and feet of Jesus here on earth. And if you see your brown or black brother or sister having issues or problems, your job, my brothers and sisters, is to stand up and say something about it. And don't be like the preacher who walked by the issues or the Levite who walked by the issues. But who is my neighbor? My neighbor is whoever God puts me in contact with on a day-to-day basis, whether I'm on the campus of Tarleton State, whether I'm in Walmart, whether I'm getting my hair cut or my nails done, whether you're golfing, wherever you are. And if you friends, if you really consider me to be your brother or consider that black lady to be your sister, use what you have, your voice, your privilege, your power, to help move the needle to the next level. Because if you have a better Timber Ridge, you'll have a better Stephenville. If you have a better Stephenville, then you have a better Erath County. If you have a better county, then you have a better state. If you have a better state, then you have a better country. And if you have a better country, you have a better world. Why is the world better? The world is better because because America is better. Why is America better? Because the states are better. Why are the states better? It's because our communities and our cities are better. And why our cities and communities better is because the church is better. And God has called you and our friends to be his feet on earth, to be his mouthpiece on earth. And regardless of the race of the person, if you believe they have been born in the image and likeness of God just like you, you have a spiritual duty as a Christian to see somebody other than you that's going through to help them along the way. That's what Jesus is saying in Luke 10. That's who our neighbor is. And those are the people who we have been called to minister to, the least, the last, and the left out.
That's good. Thank you, Pastor Damien. So you use the word privilege. Sometimes that can be a word that people struggle with. One of the things that you have taught me, and I've really learned from both of you guys, you have said there are things that I can say as a white pastor that carry different weight if you say them as a black pastor.
That's right.
You say them as a black pastor, of course he's going to say that. He's African American.
Right.
But if I say the same thing as a white pastor, it carries different weight.
Let's start listening. Yeah.
Because different people will listen to.
That's right.
That's what you're referring to there.
Absolutely.
It's good.
Absolutely.
That's very good.
It's and what it is, it's a unique platform. So,
good.
like, I'm from Houston. I'm from the city. I don't know anything about hunting or guns or anything like that, right? So when I moved up here, all my friends hunt and shoot and do all kind of country stuff, right? So when I'm around them, I listen. They talk about hunting. They talk about guns, and I listen, and I zone in because I don't have that perspective, but I'm creating it. So then when I go back home to Houston and I'm around my family, I'm like the hunting expert, right?
So awesome.
So I'm talking about does and bucks and all this stuff, and they looking at me crazy. But so I think, like, as far as like a white privilege, you have a privilege to sit and listen and then create a kingdom perspective, a perspective that's rooted in love.
That's right.
And then share that with your white friends, your white family. The chances are when you leave here, when you leave this building, I see a lot of college students, like if you're in a sorority or fraternity or anything, or have roommates, they might be white. They might not have the perspective that you have because they aren't sitting in this building right now, but you do. So I think that's a huge privilege to have, and it's a huge platform to have, and I think it's kingdom to use it. So.
That's good. That's really good. So Matthew 5:9, Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be called children of God." So the children of God are the people who are the peacemakers. A lot of times we misinterpret that to mean peacekeepers. We think blessed are the peacekeepers. So we just want to keep the peace. So when it comes to tough issues like this, it comes to tough topics like this, we're like, well, I know it's a tough topic, so I just want to keep the peace. So somebody makes a racist joke, and we don't laugh at it, but we also don't challenge them in it. Or somebody makes a racist comment, we might not agree with it, but we also don't speak up. Right. There's a difference in keeping the peace and making the peace. Making peace takes action to make sure that God's peace it dwells in the environments that we dwell in. So along those lines, Pastor Damien, we'll start with you. As a pastor, I want your perspective from a pastor to a community of faith. As a pastor, what are a couple things that you would challenge those of us who are in the majority to do to better love and serve our brothers and sisters who are minorities?
I'm glad you asked that. Two of my American heroes, Pastor Nick, and you already know this, is number one is John McCain. I love him. He's gone to be with the Lord now, but he is one of my American heroes. And there's another one by the name of John Lewis, who just died a few months ago. John Lewis is known as one of the fathers of the civil rights movement, and that he walked with Dr. King. He is a part of the Big Six, who are the ones responsible for the March on Washington. He's part of the big six people who helped organize that, where Dr. King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. And he talked about getting in good trouble. And that's what I want to leave you with today, Timber Ridge, as a pastor. Get in good trouble. And you say, what in the world? Because, growing up, you caught a beat down if you got in trouble, right? He says that I dare you to get in good trouble. And he spent the majority of his life getting in good trouble. And there are four things that I think about when I think about his life, his legacy. Because in March of 1965, March 7th of 1965 is known as what we call Bloody Sunday. It's when a group of people in Selma, Alabama, led by him and others, walked across the Edmunds Pettus Bridge. And as we're walking across, because they were trying to, they were marching, trying to get the right to vote. Think about it. Voting Rights Act hasn't been here that long. Just think about 1965 to now. That's really not a long time. Some of you talking about, they old people to me because I'm only 18, 19. But it's really not that long if you do the year of 2020 and subtract that from 1965. That's really not a long time. African Americans in this country have only been able to vote since then. Think about that for a moment. The late 60s up until now. And John Lewis, one of the reasons I love him is because a lot of people don't know about him is that he's not just the honorable representative of Georgia, John Lewis. He was also known as Reverend John Lewis. He preached his first sermon when he was 15 years old. And he talks about getting in good trouble. Listen to some of the things he says. He says, what I want folks to do is get in good trouble, which simply means it's necessary trouble. It's good trouble, necessary trouble, because we need to redeem the soul of America. Because we're still living in a world and a society, unfortunately, that looks at folks based off of color. And unfortunately, the church is just as guilty. We had a pastor of the largest church in America in the 1960s preaching against the integration of the church. Think about that. A pastor of the largest church in America was preaching against that in the 60s. So Lewis says, I'm a preacher, I'm a minister, I am a Christian agitator, but I want us to get in good trouble. And the four things I think about is speaking truth to power. Similar to what I was talking about earlier about using your voice, using your platform. Speak truth to power. If you see issues going on in our society, we have an obligation as Christians to speak truth to sin. Sin is sin, and sin is an abomination to anybody. So since all have sinned, according to Paul, and falling short of God's glory, if we see another brother or sister in sin, we not only should talk to them about it, but help them to move to where he wants them to be. So getting in good trouble, number one, speak truth to power. If you see racism going on in your world, in your area that you're growing up in, that you may be in college and see some stuff, speak truth to power. Open your mouth and speak against that. But then he talks about never think you're too young. This is another thing I think about, because he was a young man when he was helping the Big Six organize the March on Washington. Never, ever, ever feel like you're too young to make a difference. As Christians, I think about the life of Josiah. He was young when he became the king. But guess what? He had the king, he was the king, and the crown was too big, but he had to grow into his responsibility. But it did not stop the fact that he was the king. And since we are children of God, we should speak to power. But friends, another thing we have to do is never think that your age should stop you from doing what you know you're supposed to do. So do just that. Here's another one. Become a racial equity advocate. Become a racial equity advocate. We shouldn't still be having the first black judge, first black chief of police, first black this, but that's the world we're living in. So we're still breaking racial barriers every day as African Americans in our country. But you have a wonderful responsibility as the church to become a racial equity advocate and use your platform to do just that. But finally, never give up. And the reason I put never give up last is because when you start dealing with this race stuff, hear me, my white friends, they're going to start calling you the end lover. When you go eat at the cafeteria when you leave here today, just ask your other friend who may have never, I know you may have never heard that, but just nudge your neighbor, and when you get in the car, ask them what in the world's pastor talking about. What's an end lover? Okay? Start loving black folk. You'll find out real quick what that is. If you haven't heard it, just keep living and start loving folk that look differently than you. All right? Never give up, because it's going to be hard. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. You have to fight and fight and fight. And I hear you, some of you saying, well, that's just too much work. But if you say you love me, and if you say I'm your brother, or that lady is your sister, regardless of the color of their skin, then you have a right to speak up for them and to never get up, because there are only two things in life that you and I can control. That's our attitude and that's our effort. That's the only thing in life. I cannot control somebody calling me the N-word. I cannot control the way somebody treats me. But what I can control is my response to them. What I can control is the effort that I put in every day in my life. I was raised, and Braxton may have heard this as well, you got to be twice as good, boy. And other African Americans here, as your parents sent you off to school, they say, remember, you got to be twice as good. Because in America, to black people, you all have already got out the running blocks, and we're still in the blocks waiting to hear the gun. And when we've heard the gun, you're already 10 steps ahead of us. So we feel, our parents felt like because the race is not equal, they teach us we've got to be just as good, if not better, than our other counterparts. Think about that. That's why I'm telling you, never give up, friends. Never give up. Never give up, because it's going to be hard. But the two things we can control, and I'll leave you with this, is our attitude and our effort. Every night when you go to bed, or prepare to go to bed, when you're talking to the Lord, always ask yourself, how was my attitude today, and did I give it everything that I could have? Not just on the behalf of others, but on the behalf of the kingdom. Because if we do it on behalf of the kingdom, we'll do it on behalf of others. Bless you.
That's good. Braxton, same question, different lens. So I asked Pastor Damien, as a pastor, you as a neighbor, you're Stephenvillian, you're Tarleton alumni, you're one of us, you live right here in our community. How would you answer that question? As a neighbor, how would you challenge your neighbors? What are some things you would challenge us to do to stand to up against racism, to love and serve those who are in the minority?
I think first it starts with you. It starts with killing the stereotypes and the prejudice that you may have, which, like, okay, so that word prejudice comes from prejudge, which a lot of times are things that we create internally that we don't even know to be true. So, and that can be about any race, that's black, white, and Hispanic. There's prejudice to say that all Hispanic people cut grass, and that all black people are fast, and that white people can't dance, or something like that. I know some white people that can get down, okay? So that's definitely not true, and none of those are true. So I think killing those stereotypes, because so we just laughed at that, and some of that can be funny, but to think about other stereotypes and prejudice that can be deadly. So, like, one for black people would be, like, I've heard people say, oh man, I wouldn't want to fight you, I bet you can fight. Well, you don't know that to be true. And why you can laugh at that, for somebody else that might be threatening. And that might put a spirit of fear in them that could get them to pull a gun on me, that can get you to harm somebody because you're in fear for your life, like you said, as far as police officers. And it's not just police officers, but I think it just starts with killing that. And in 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says, we're destroying all speculations and every lawfully thing raised up against the knowledge of God, and we're taking every thought captive to make it obedient to Christ. I think that's where it starts. I think it starts with taking every thought captive and making it obedient to God's word. And that can be anything. That can be pulling up to all substance, seeing a black and Hispanic person at this gas pump and going to choose a different one. That can be walking down the aisle of HEB and seeing a group of people that don't look like you and don't dress like you and going on a different aisle and circling back around. Those things, and it's crazy to think as Christians that we can have those internal thoughts and not take them captive and never expect them to come alive physically. Does that make sense? So I think that's a big thing, to kill those prejudice, and also to continue this conversation. So this is a great conversation. I've learned a lot from these two guys. I hope y'all have too. But if it stays in this building, it's pointless. Like, we just had a little good old time and it does nothing. I think it's important that we call it what it is. Like Damien said, call it sin, call racism sin. I had a guy at my job the other day tell me that his daughter, she's in middle school, was wondering what all the commotion was and why there's all these protests and all this stuff going on social media. And he said, well, it's just bad people treating other people badly. That's a privilege, to be able to treat that in a nonchalant way, because some people actually have to live through that. I've known what racism was since before I can remember. So I think calling racism and calling it sin is also a great thing to do. Continue that conversation at home. Call it what it is. It's sin, and it's contradictory to what God's word says and how he wants us to live. So
That's good. Thank you for that, Braxton. That's really good stuff. So here's the thing that I've learned from these guys and from others in my walk in my faith. The health of our relationship with God will never exceed the health of our relationship with our fellow man. Jesus says, when he asked what the greatest commandment was, he said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. The second greatest commandment is like unto it. He literally says it's connected to it. And here it is, to love your neighbor as yourself. So the health of our relationship with God will never be greater than the health of our relationship with our fellow man. That's why reconciliation matters, right, guys? That's why reconciliation matters. And so I just want to leave you with this verse today. It's Micah chapter 6, verse 8. In the Old Testament, it says this: He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? Not what does the Lord suggest of you, but what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. When we think about race, it's a matter of justice. And the Bible says that we are required as followers of Jesus to do justice. The Hebrew word there is the word esah. It's the same word that's used in the Bible in Genesis chapter 2 when it says God created the heavens and the earth. So what the Bible is saying here is that we are to create or to make justice. That is work. It's something we have to work at. It's something we have to put effort into. It's something we have to choose to do. And so I would challenge you, as a follower of Jesus, do the work of racial reconciliation in your heart, in your life, in your home. Do the work of justice. It will take work. So here's what that might mean. It might mean that when you leave here today, you need to find somebody who doesn't look like you. And you need to say, hey, can we have lunch sometime this week? Can we have coffee in the next few weeks? Can we just hang out for an hour? I've got some questions. I've done that with you. I've said, Pastor Damien, I don't understand this. I made a post on Juneteenth. Before I posted on Juneteenth, I sent it to you. And I said, I'm about to post this, but I don't want it to be offensive. Should I post it? And you said, don't dare post those words on any social media platform because you will offend every African-American person that you know. And you corrected me in it. And I was able to have a conversation and go, why doesn't this work this way? Braxton, you and I have had conversations where you've said, no, the reality, Nick, is this in our community. And so have those conversations. Be willing to learn. Go to lunch with somebody. Invite someone into your home and have dinner or coffee. Listen, if you don't know somebody who doesn't look like you, on the way out, find somebody that goes to this church that doesn't look like you. And if you're white like me, be patient, because if everybody tries to find somebody that doesn't look like them, all of our friends that are brown and black are going to be booked up for dinner for the next 3 years, okay? So be patient, but do life with somebody who does not look like you.
That's right.
Do the work of justice. Let's pray. God, thank you for the opportunity that we have to talk about things that your heart, Jesus. And thank you for these men and for the relationship you've blessed me with through them. God, thank you for their voice and their heart for your kingdom. And God, we pray that this would be a conversation starter, not a conversation. That it would be a conversation starter, that in homes all across Erath County, that people would begin to have a conversation of what does it look like to live in reconciliation and honor Jesus in my relationships with every person of every color in all of my world. Help us to do the work of justice, Jesus, because it matters to your mission and to your heart. We ask all these things in your life-giving, life-changing name. Amen. Before we go today, I just want to let you know that if you were not uncomfortable enough today with the conversation, next Sunday, we're going to wrap up Pin the Grenade by talking about the politics of Jesus. So if you want to get real uncomfortable, be sure that you're here next Sunday, because we'll continue to dive into these tough topics and what God's Word says about them. Thanks so much for being here today. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Let's do the work of racial reconciliation and continue the conversation. You're dismissed.